Hi, in this segment I'm going to be going over with you the way that I would start a painting. Alright, I'm going to show you how I start a portrait. It's not going to be incredibly thorough, but it's at least how I would start an underpainting and focus on each characteristic of the face. Now, my picture is not the best picture. You really want as good a quality as you can get. But this is the model in most of my paintings, so I know her face pretty much by heart anyway. And that helps. So what I do when I start a painting, no matter what, I always start with the middle color and just go over the whole thing. My picture's a little yellow, but I know that her face isn't really yellow. So I'm going to take my palette knife and see what color I can mix up. I have a lot of phthalo blue in there, which is very strong. I'll just lay that in. It doesn't matter exactly what color go on the first couple layers, but if it's close to the skin tone you want, it's better. I'm going to put this on pretty thin so I can still see the lines that I've already drawn on there. That doesn't look very thin, so I'm going to thin it out some more. A lot of times people take a long time drawing out with the pencil the underpainting of a face, and that kind of stinks because as soon as you start painting over it, it just all disappears. So it's better to do it with some paint like I did here and then let it dry, and then as soon as it's dry you can go back and start painting over it. And if you don't want to wait a whole day for it to dry, you can just do your underpainting in acrylics. Alright, so her face is kind of gray-blue. That's okay. In the picture, I can't really see where her face ends, so I'm going to have to make it up. But I'm going to start with big blotchy colors. I'll start with the highlights, just pure titanium white, and go everywhere that I see a whole lot of white. And especially with portraits, I always start at the top of the painting and then go down. And of course, squinting your eyes definitely helps in this process. If you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm painting a nose, I'm painting an eye, painting her ear, it's very difficult. Because then you start painting what your head wants you to think an ear looks like, or what it wants you to think an eyeball looks like, instead of what you're actually looking at. And once you've been painting for a while, that's kind of just how you see everything. Is in shapes. This whole side of her face is really dark, so I'm just going to go right in, put in a dark background. Okay, so I've mixed up a nice dark color for this flesh. Just going to lay that on. Eyebrows I'll probably put in later, but I'll just get the shade in there. Now the forehead is really interesting because you need to make all those little indentations that you can see on there where the skull is as exact as possible, of course along with the rest of the painting. But a lot of portraits, the forehead's just flat and it looks kind of fake. Now honestly, the eye, I'm trying to put too much detail in there. You don't need to. You can just put a bunch of color. Alright, and then let's take a third color. Maybe a nice orangey yellow. And the color I'm using now, the transparent orange iron oxide, is definitely one of my favorites for flesh. It's one of the M-gram colors, and they have beautiful glazing colors. There's a lot of pigment. I want to get a little bit more detail in there so I can tell where things are. Trying to find the other side of her face there. Alright, now I'm just gonna blend all this in a little bit. Now, depending on how many layers you put, you can do it a lot thinner than I'm doing right now. It's fairly thick for me. She looks a bit like an alien, but that won't last too long. I always find if your painting looks really bad when you're starting, then that's a good sign. It means you're not looking at it too closely. At least the details. Okay, now I'm going to turn her from an alien into somewhat of a person. So I'm going to go back in with that dark color and start laying in some more exact shapes. And the eyes are everything in painting. Once you get the eyes down, it's easy to match up the rest of the features. It's also important to remember that with eyes, they're not oval. They're very rarely almond shaped. They're all different shapes and different shadows. The lids are always going to be in a different position. She's still looking pretty weird, so I'll try to fix that with the nose by pulling that dark color from the background and playing with the negative space. Now, none of this is going to look completely right until I get a good dark in the background and I can start getting the edge of her nose in there. Okay, so when working on the mouth of the portrait, people always forget this little highlight over the lip, but that's what really makes the lip pucker out and make it look like a face. Make it look like a 3D face. And lips are fun because they have all these little lines that poke out. Most of those I wouldn't do until closer to the end, little details. Right now it's just getting the idea of it in there. It doesn't really look like her quite yet, but if you just keep going back and forth, putting in little details here and there, when it gets too wet, let it dry, go back the next day, or 6 hours later. Try again, make it a little bit darker each time in the shadows, a little bit lighter. And you will have a very, very pretty portrait when you're all done.